Well, hey there. Welcome back. We're covering the rest of season 4, episode 2, Nightshade. I'm still tickled when I say season 4 things. It's going to be like this for a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
I'm like so giddy. Well, anyway, Serena goes to visit Fred so she can try to manipulate him in a rather generic chapel. He sees her and he points out that he knows she's not sleeping well and she's surprised that he asked. And he says, "You're still my wife." And I didn't read that as caring at all. I just read that as he sees her as his property. I felt like he was checking in on his property. It didn't
hmm
feel
Yeah.
concerned.
Right. Or at best, he's saying that because you're my property, I have to put on this facade of caring about you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for a moment she may have taken it as a sweet gesture
Yeah, she did.
because her face did soften. She looked forward for a moment. She seemed to relax her shoulders briefly. It became abundantly clear by the end of this that that was purely lip service.
Yeah, she's using memories to get on his good side. Come on. That's okay. I just have to say that if my husband and I were this pissed off at each other and this much at odds, and if he came to me and used this, are you listening, babe? If he came to me and used this, like, oh, I'm gonna, start saying something like kind, like, oh, remember that time, like thing, I would be able to read into that instantly. It disappoints me that Serena tried to use that tactic because I thought she'd be smarter than that. She really doesn't understand who she's dealing with anymore, and it kind of blows my mind.
She told Tuello that she knew the Fred before Gilead.
Yeah.
And I think that's what she's appealing to by bringing up this memory. It's not just any memory, it's a memory of a time when she feels that he was different. And I think she does, in this moment, really believe that that Fred is a different Fred than now. And I think it's not until the end of this conversation that she realizes whether he's different from then or now, it doesn't really matter because he is not going to go back to the Fred that she thinks she has, and I would argue never existed.
Also argue never existed. Can absolutely agree with that. And
Yeah.
I do appreciate what you're saying here with her trying to harken back to a Fred that she in her memory exists. But ultimately, to go back to Scarlett's point as well, is utilizing the evocation of memory. We expect more from Serena, and whether she is trying to reprise a Fred that no longer exists or she's appealing to the current Fred, she's already made a delineation between the two. And utilizing the evocation of memory is it's such a low grade type of psychological warfare. It's effectively bringing a knife to a gunfight when going up against current day Fred.
You want to know something too? Is what Serena was trying to do here was what June has tried to do in a past episode to get back on Fred's side. And it worked for June. It doesn't work for Serena. Serena's not ever going to get the old Fred back. She won't. Who got the old Fred was June.
Yes, I agree. And I love what you're saying that it worked with June, and I feel like when Fred says that Serena's rusty, I feel like it's actually that he's just finally learned from his experience with June. Because he fell for all of this shit with June.
Yeah, he
And
did.
that's what makes me think like this episode screams that Serena is doing everything June was doing, but it's
Mhm.
not having the same effect.
That's such a good point, is that he's finally desensitized to it because of his time with June, and
Yeah.
June utilizing these tactics before Serena could. I love that.
Not to give Fred any kind of credit, but I don't think he ever realized that Serena was going to flip on him the way she did when she got him arrested. And he is still very much scarred from that. I don't think he is ready to trust her at all. So her coming in and thinking that she's just going to easily open the doors to this trust and this marriage that used to exist, that she believes exists, just by bringing up a happy memory is again what you were saying earlier of it's just not a good move here because it's just not going to work.
When Fred was saying that thing about the very small island, that's how they think of God in this place. They've made him small. They've made Fred small. Fred is small, and Fred can't handle this.
Yes, thank you. You read my notes exactly.
It is fun it's fun to think of Fred not being able to cope with being small, considering that Serena even throws it in his face but at the end of this conversation that he has never once stood up for her once he got that taste of power. So where Serena thinks that she might be able to revive the Fred of old because that small reduced Fred is now the Fred before her. However, she's not bearing in mind they have both damaged each other. He is far worse than she is. However, through her attempts at manipulation and through everything that they have been through, he is still going to be apprehensive about his dealings with her. So his attitude towards her has changed just as well as her attitude towards him has changed. Does that make more sense?
Absolutely, yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. He does do the classic abuser thing where he turns things back on her. He tells her that he's not being manipulated by her now. And then, perhaps the best moment out of this whole episode is Serena saying, Fred, please, I just want my daughter back. And Fred says, Nicole is not your daughter anymore. Then she is mine. And I wrote LOL on half of my page just because I was gleeful. Somebody finally says it.
And as he delivers that line, he turns and faces her head on. And it is just so nice to have that confrontation come straight into her face. And the rest of their conversation and argument it continues to be that satisfying because she's right too. Like, as she comes back and says what she says, like, as they go back and forth, it's just like, I feel like it's an entire season of us talking about all the different ways that Fred and Serena feel about each other. And then in just one scene, they just get to lay it all on the line. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Thank you. They really, really have just done a number on each other, and they so rarely get to just say exactly how they feel about it.
It's an appropriate setting for them to do that as well, considering both of them, whether it's genuine or feigned faith, it's still faith of some persuasion. And for the two of them to be in a house of worship, what better place to be entirely candid with one another and to speak their truth.
Mm-hmm. And then he continues because she says that she thought he would go back to the Fred she used to know once they were out of Gilead. And he says, I am as you made me. Again, turning it back on her. She did get them to Canada. That is why they are in Canada. But this is all because of men like Fred. Like men like Fred who are the representation of patriarchy and male chauvinism and misogyny. But it's her fault, always.
But at least she, in this scene, fought back for herself and stood up for him and told him that it was just bullshit. Like, it was nice to be able to hear her say that, because in the last episode, I was saying that I wasn't sure if she either just didn't feel like she could speak up to him or if it was just because Toello came in right behind her and she just didn't get a chance to. But in this scene, she got a chance to and she took it. And it was nice for her to at least be able to turn the tables on him, because it's total bullshit what he's saying.
And he's sitting there calling her the manipulator. He made a career out of manipulating people.
Yeah, he just made my skin crawl by the end of the scene. And that is why I'm so angry that it's such a delightful conversation to see him turn to her and say those words of, Nicole is not your daughter any more than she is mine. And then to end with delusional, like, that is everything I've ever wanted someone to say right to Serena's face. But for it to come in this conversation and out of Fred's mouth, it's like, oh, he's such an asshole in this conversation. And he's so unfair to what he said. Like, it's just not true what he's saying. And so it's like, God, I just hate both of you so much.
I think I gave you too much freedom. Oh my God.
Absolutely abysmal.
You could have a participation with just all the women that Fred has fucking wronged. Seriously. Like, wronged personally. He is just that much of a piece of shit. And then, you know what I really liked is on our way out of this scene when she's left alone And that chapel, even though we know it's tiny, it looks so big all of a sudden. And she looks so small and she's down like in the perspective point, you know?
It's the second time in this episode, too, that we've seen a woman who fancies herself to be in a position of power actually prove to be incredibly tiny in her surroundings.
Wow.
It's a nice it's for me that was a nice visual comparison between Serena and Esther.
Oh, yes. Excellent.
Both fancying themselves to be powerful, but both very much in reduced circumstances.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is that sentence again. I love it.
Let's cut to some feet approaching a grand-looking house. Turns out it's Moira on what one can only presume is a wellness visitation check.
Sounds like it. I think wasn't that the house that they were trying to get some papers signed or something like that. It was part of the discussion with her and Emily earlier. I never really understood what exactly it was, though.
Yeah, I don't know what they meant, but there's some kind of paperwork. She said, should I call and leave another message? At this point, Moira's showing up, and this woman's rifling through paperwork, she knows what Moira's there for.
And as she opens up the door, she's all apologies, and Moira's like, oh, no worries, nothing to apologize for. Like, sudden parenthood is very difficult to wrap your head around and deal with. So Moira is being as kind as humanly possible. But all is not peace and bliss in this house. And they allude to it with the stained glass in the foyer.
There was a lot of red, but I couldn't really tell what the pattern was in the glass.
The pattern was very reminiscent of the Gilead symbolism. It was a manila background of sorts with like a red curve up and a red spike up.
Oh, man.
As soon as I saw it, I was like, is that Gilead glass? And it's not. But it is sort of like a nice balance between the Gilead symbol that we see waving on the flag in front of Jezebels Country Club and the symbol of the Jedi Knights. And I'm bringing up Star Wars now. I'm planting a little seed. We'll get back to this a little bit later. But yeah, it's very clearly like trying to do a bit of a hat tip to the Gilead symbol.
There was a ton of wife blue in this episode, too. Well, throughout this house. But it pops up in other places, too, like when later on when Emily and Moira, I think, are in the boardroom, or maybe that scene already happened already. I don't remember, but I just remember there was like that color in there, and it's always present in a way.
I think that they intentionally throw it in because it's a very pleasing color, and also because it's subtle enough insofar as if they were to throw in bright red everywhere, we would immediately pick up as something that they're trying to bring back to some sort of handmade symbolism. But the wave blue, it's a bit more subtle.
It makes you always know that even though, like, if we're in Canada or even in flashback times, that the colors pop up constantly. So it's always a constant reminder of what we're going to end up in. You know, yes, you're watching this, but look how they end up.
It's kind of like in Gilead as elsewhere. I feel like that's the phrase from the Testaments that will just always keep coming back to me. And it's the same thing here. It's like, I understand why this foster, the aunt of this child, is upset, but it's the stained glass on the window and the wife blue throughout is, if anything, I feel like it's just pointing to the fact that she is not handling this she's handling this as poorly as we've seen Gilead people handle the situation of, I don't care if you think that this child shouldn't have been in Gilead, and I don't care if you don't think that the parents who raised him are his parents. I understand why you're upset about that. I just am this entire conversation, this entire scene with this aunt and this nephew of hers, it's just ridiculous to me that she doesn't understand what this kid's going through.
Hey, here's another thing, too. This kid is in this house, and there are these colors that are obviously straight out of Gilead, which is the home that he misses. And so he has this constant reminder, too, and he can't even really verbalize it. It's like it's ever present, and he's not even really sure why, but he's got these colors to trigger him constantly. And then he's got this aunt who's not transitioning well, and neither is he. It's really not a great recipe for success here.
and she's an aunt, but not in the same context. So it's confusing. And it's an aunt, but not an aunt that he's familiar with. So everything is just going to feel off. And like, the fact that he won't eat the food she cooks and she can't figure out why, like, come on. I just am so angry with her for the scene. The TV blaring in the background was jarring to me as one who has TV on in my house more often than not. And it was still obnoxious to hear the TV going in the background. And it's like, the fact that you can't apply just some basic, like, where is this child coming from knowledge as to what might make him comfortable. And it's like, well, what do you normally eat? Well, I gave him all the things kids normally eat. And it's like, oh, call him the name that he knows. Like, it was so offensive to us when we finally figured out that Hannah's name was changed to Agnes. And that was like, just, it's a terrible thing to change this child's name. And now she doesn't understand why he won't go by a different name than he's been called his entire life.
Like, she does make a logical sound argument. I can't understand, like, calling the child James because that's the name, or let me see, that was the name of his father. It's also like the name of my brother, like that's his real name, the name he was born with. However, it's not affording Asher any sort of luxury of time to wrap his head around this concept.
It's just straight up changing his identity on the kid. Like, the kid does not feel like he is James. As far as he's concerned, he is Asher. I mean, and he's also probably like 8 or 9 years old. I'd be like, what the fuck? That's not my goddamn name. Like, it's just, that's the only name he knows and remembers. That's got to be, and he doesn't want to be where he is. So it's so difficult. And then as far as the food thing goes, I wonder if they just haven't had enough intel to understand the kind of foods that these kids were eating. I mean, this is a kid straight out of a commander's house, and we know how, like, super de-duper, like, secret everything is and how they don't have a lot of info. I bet they weren't even, there's a possibility that they weren't even considering that, like, oh my God, children's dietary, like, habits have changed to the point where they don't eat pizza and chicken fingers anymore in Gilead. Like, I don't know. It might not have been up, like, on their list of things to care about because they didn't have these 86 kids dropped in their country to figure it out with. This is I think this is new territory. And they'll probably understand with time that that is the issue.
They are definitely overtaxed within the system, but specifically Emily knew that her cholesterol was high because the diet is different there. So Emily, who seems very involved with placing these children, I just don't understand why it wouldn't occur to them that these kids might not be eating the same food in Canada that they're eating in Gilead, especially with all the trade embargoes.
I might be able to offer some insight here. Both of you have children. Both of you are used to having to court your children's friends as well, in the before times, of course, and having to ask, like, what are your dietary restrictions? What do you and don't you like for sleepovers and things like that? Moira does make a point of mentioning in this scenario that the aunt is a sudden parent, meaning that this is their first time having to deal with kids. You're expecting a sudden parent to make these accommodations when it's abundantly clear that this first-time parent can't, like, this first-time sudden parent isn't even, like, understanding the psychological ramifications of just calling the kid by the name that they've gone by, let alone, or versus the name that they're used to, versus, like, what their birth name is. So I think it's a safe presumption to say this isn't the sort of person that's going to think that an 8-year-old is going to have the mental capacity to have preferences because they're not used to spending time around them.
I totally agree with you on that, but I'm just thinking I feel like it's an agency issue where the people that were passing these kids off to, Auntie, whoever she is, to, like be with, like, work with a social worker. And I guess this would be like Moira's kind of, I don't know, not quite Moira's position, because I don't think Moira is necessarily the one that, like, put him in that home. I feel like she's more like the person to, like, just visit and stuff. But I'm just thinking, like, placing the kid with the home. I would expect social workers to ask questions like that. So that's why I'm thinking it just might not be on their radar. This is like the fresh batch, They're the test kittens to see how we handle refugee kids that come out of nowhere.
They might be. That could be the case. This could also, I'm sorry, Marjorie, did I interrupt you? Okay. Sorry, I just want to make sure. This could also be a commentary on the current state of foster programs and the adoption system in the United States. When you have um, disagreements about parentage and who should raise a child, and more often than not, if the biological parents are either unwilling or unable to parent the children, um, the next in line biologically, with any sort of actual blood relation, can then vie for rights over to be able to raise the child, and there's much less consideration as to whether or not they are mentally or financially capable of doing it. It's this notion of keep the children with the family. And in a case like this, we see that this might not necessarily be a good fit because it didn't. I mean, it might be in the long run, but right now it's a rocky start to the road. Because they're both dealing with this. They're both dealing with this transition, and the only reason that Asher is with this woman is because this is like there's a biological connection, and that's it.
I just thought of something so cool. What if Rita adopted him in a future episode? Wouldn't that be freaking awesome? Because I feel like Rita would love the opportunity to be a parent again. And these two get each other, as we see. I just think it could be cool. Like, because what if they can't? So he's with the aunt. It sounds like there's nowhere else that he can go to at the time. The aunt may not be the best choice for this. Not that she doesn't care about him, but just that she may not be best equipped for it. Rita could be.
In time, the aunt, this could be a perfectly good situation for Asher and his aunt. It's just so new that I just don't understand where. I mean, obviously, it's just they're overtaxed. That just has to be the situation here. Of all of a sudden, there's 86 kids, and there's only so many people who can do so much. Hence the fundraising. Hence Emily and Moira working overtime. Like, I get it. So I'm guessing that's the biggest issue here, because eventually, I mean, I think we can all agree that this is a better home for Asher, just being in Canada. So, but it's an adjustment. Like, that's what we had talked about in season 3 with all these kids coming out. It is a traumatic adjustment. It is going to take time for him to process and understand. And he needs someone like Rita. And I'm just not sure why there wasn't more people involved to be like, ease this transition that is going to be hard for everyone involved. Instead, it's just like, here, Gilead child, have Canadian aunt, figure it out.
Thank
Probably
you.
because-
Yeah, that. So the next scene is Moira and Emily are back at work, and Moira is talking about exactly what we've already discussed, how these kids coming out of Gilead have to make this huge, difficult transition, and many have lost the families that they've known. It's a fact. And Emily says, well, I guess June didn't think that part through. And Moira says that's what she does. Take the big swing and fuck the consequences. You know, we've already said that's just a really interesting take for her because it just doesn't really sound like the June that Moira ever had to deal with. I think she was just saying it because she was frustrated. That's it. I mean, she knows it's not necessarily true, and they know that she did the right thing, but it's just, none of this is ideal. Stay in Gilead or get out of Gilead. None of it is ideal, but just about everybody's going to agree, again, that these kids got out, and that is the good thing in this. That's the bright side.
In a situation like this, where Moira is coming off the heels of being faced with these children, making this transition from one major way of life to another, whether it be from the United States to Gilead or from Gilead to Canada, Moira's being faced with watching this transition again and having to acknowledge that and watch the psychological damage that it could potentially be having, and watching as these kids struggle through that. And it's going to take a bit of an emotional toll on her as well, because she's had to walk that same transition as well. I mean, granted, a different path, but still in the same direction. So she must feel a lot of anger and resentment at this point, and who better to channel that towards than the one person who's not there to defend themselves. Also, I mean, she's got to be at that end, that same end of the rope as well.
Scarlett, I can't
Yeah,
hear you.
I had muted myself and I forgot.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I didn't look up.
That's okay. Continue with what you were saying.
I was going to say, and there's also the notion of Moira perhaps seeing a bit of her own transition with Asher and that aunt, with Moira acknowledging that becoming a sudden parent is extremely taxing, and then in the next scene, Moira is venting to Emily saying, like, I love Nicole, but I never wanted to be her mom.
And she says in the scene with Asher too, Moira says when he asks if he's going to see his parents again, and she has to give him that hard truth, and she looks him right in the eye and she tells him no, because that is the truth and it is what he needs to hear. And then she follows up with, and it's okay to feel sad about that. And he storms off, and it almost felt to me like the aunt had followed him. And I really felt like Moira was by herself in the room at that point. That's why I took it as she was saying it as much about Asher as she was about herself when she says, it's all right, it's natural for Asher to be angry. And I feel like that was as much her reminding herself that it's natural for her to feel whatever it is she seems to be feeling through this episode.
All these feelings are valid. The whole situation sucks for everybody, literally everybody. It's kind of like a no-win situation in the short term.
I do like that Moira is willing to talk about her feelings and her emotions, though, because in the first 2 seasons, the bits of Moira that we did get to see felt emotionally closed off. And it seems as though she's much more open and giving with herself. Even just saying to Emily, I'm tired of feeling guilty. That doesn't sound like a sentence that we would expect to hear from Moira in season 1 or in season 2. And then like asking Emily, are we terrible people? These seem like acknowledgments of some sort of emotional reevaluation of Moira. Still very much the same person in spirit, but I like that she's becoming a bit more introspective as well.
She's having these feelings too because she feels guilty. I mean, she does say it that, you know, it's because she got to escape twice and June didn't. Well, that's debatable too. But also, at least Moira is in Canada and June's not. I mean, how could she not ever feel guilty for that? It's like survivor's guilt, you know?
It absolutely. And say, of course it's survivor's guilt, especially considering she left her on the train terminal. She left her right on the train tracks, and took the train away while June was recaptured. Like, she's going to eternally feel guilty about that. So back at the ranch, June is heading back towards the Guardian's steel, like, travel bus of doom. And June and Janine are walking, and June motions towards Esther and says to Janine, make sure she has good shoes, while I'm talking about preparing for the escape. And again, no matter what June tries to do, she will never be able to escape this maternal instinct. And I think here she's really owning like some sense of like maternal ownership over Esther.
Yeah, she is. And also kind of over Janine too, because Janine wants to go with June, but Janine's like, no, like, you know, I need you to stay here and basically keep down the fort until it's time to leave. You know, make sure Esther gets her hiking shoes on. Then we get into this red leader standing by, which, Roxy, I know that you've got things to say about that.
I do. All right. So first off, red leader standing by is a Star Wars reference. If anyone is going to make a Star Wars reference, it should, of course, be Janine, because in season 1, when June and Janine are walking and they give each other placations of praise be, Janine says, may the force be with you, which is our first hat tip to like some sort of normalcy. It's the first thing that we get that's like kind of brings it close to home. So of course Janine should be the one to deliver this red leader standing by. Red leader standing by is from the very first Star Wars movie, episode 4, A New Hope, released in 1976, 1977, maybe 79, late 70s in any event. And as soon as I heard Janine say this, I was simultaneously excited and then also was like, oh no, people are going to die. And here's why. So that quote is said as the Rebel Alliance, aka the Jedi and all the people that are fighting against the Galactic Empire, are launching their assault on the Death Star. The Red Squadron leader is doing a roll call. Red 5, Red 7, Red 15, Red 2, and then says, okay, cool, red leader standing by. Basically, it's basically what they're doing is just rolling through all of the different faces that are in the Red Battalion, and I think all but one of them dies during the onslaught and during the attack on the Death Star.
No.
For people that have seen the first Star Wars movie, you'll hear, like, as Luke Skywalker is zipping around the Death Star and, like, trying to evade Darth Vader, like, all of the different people in the Red Squadron, like, as they're CBing back and forth, just slowly and steadily, like, he loses contact with this person, until Luke Skywalker's the last person in Red Squadron. So as soon as Janine said Red Leader standing by, my heart sunk. I was like, oh no. I was like, and this is I was like, for me, this is like a massive glaring klaxon of foreshadowing that every single one of these handmaids are going to die, except for June.
And I really, really think that there's a strong possibility that you're right. The only thing that's given me hope that they're going to stick around at least a little while longer is the fact that there's, trailers where they're like running in certain spots, but we really don't have much more than that.
We don't.
So, yeah.
We don't have much more than that. And
we get Janine for more, right?
We get Janine for more. There is an explosion, though, so...
Yeah, and Janine is the one that says Red Leader standing by, so maybe Janine is, supposed to be the Red Leader, and that's supposed to, signify that she will live on. But yeah, no, that was as soon as I heard that, I had to take a pause, and I actually rewound back to the last scene to make sure that stained glass is what I thought it was, and I was like, nope, that stained glass looks like a perfect combination of the Gilead symbol and the Jedi symbol.
That's so cool.
So friggin' neat.
Yeah.
So I'd like to give a huge shout out to Kira Snyder, who I'm going to presume is a massive Star Wars fan. Kira Snyder was the writer for this week's episode.
Oh, super cool.
So if you are Kira, I see you.
That is really awesome.
And I hate that foreshadowing. I really do.
Oh my god.
That caused my my little geek heart to sink.
I'm not even a Star Wars fan, but I can still really, really appreciate that Star Wars lore being worked into the friggin' Handmaid's Tale in like these little ways, and that's so cool.
Also terrible because it means everyone's going to die.
I know.
I want to be wrong. I've never wanted to be wrong more in these predictions.
Right? I was so blissful in my ignorance of Star Wars information. That just went right over me. I was like, Red Leader. I'm like, she doesn't wear red anymore, but sure, that's cute. Moved on.
No, definitely. But also very appropriate that even if no one else like in our Red Squadron dies, it's nice that quote was specifically from episode 4, A New Hope, and perhaps like Janine might be the new hope of the Resistance as well. I don't know. I'm just trying to turn this into sunshine and rainbows. It's not going to happen.
You tried.
Yeah, optimism doesn't suit me.
So then, Moira brings Rita to Asher's house for some home-cooked Gilead food. This was so sweet. It's like good for Rita and it's good for Asher. And it makes both of them more comfortable because this is Rita's wheelhouse. Asher appreciates this familiar face because he recognizes her from the plane. He realizes like, oh my God, she's going to cook me food from home. And this made me tear up. This whole thing really made me teary-eyed. I'm like, oh, this poor kid. And then she gives him that little wooden elephant, and Moira's like, peace, I got a date for surprise pad thai. But really, this scene got me in all the feels. They cannot change his name back to James. If he feels like that is who he is, they cannot change his fucking name on him.
Forcing him to change his name back to James makes them no better than Gilead by forcing an identity onto him that he doesn't want.
That's what I mean by that wife Lou being throughout as Gilead as elsewhere, is they're not doing any better of a job with these children in this transition when both sides are claiming to be so interested in this child's best interest, and I'm not seeing that in either situation here. And it does make me obviously worried that moving forward in this season, Gilead is going to try to make a better claim for these kids who are not adjusting well because they're not getting the help they need to adjust.
The first sign of comfort that Asher has had is when Rita enters the house. It's also the first sign of comfort that we, at least on camera, see Rita getting. Because the last interaction that we had with Rita was with Moira, and you could tell that she was a bit like stilted in her responses, still felt a bit of like having to make these like platitudes. We finally see Rita be able to relax a bit when she is with Asher. I think because there's this understanding of these are two people that might at their core understand that this is going to be better for them, but this is a tough transition, whether it's for a 9-year-old or a 40-year-old.
And I love how Moira left when the aunt says to Moira, "You're not going to stay?" And she's like, "No, I've got plans or something." And she gets to take the advice that she had given Rita earlier in the episode of freedom means you're free to say no. And she finally said at this point, "No, I'm not going to stay. I'm going to do something for me. I know, like she made sure Asher had Rita, Rita has Asher, everyone's happy. And now I'm going to go do what I want to do." And I think that is part of what we're watching Moira reckon with this episode, in terms of everything that she has to do with taking care of Nicole and dealing with all this stuff at work now and all these children and all these new problems that are going to arise every day, on top of the fact that she also just met someone or I don't know how long they met, but relatively new relationship that she seems to be really head over heels for. And I feel like she's just having a hard time figuring out at what point she gets to put herself first now that she is free. So on top of the survivor's guilt, she also has, or it's probably part of the survivor's guilt, is she just wants to go have some pad thai and enjoy herself and not worry about Asher for an evening.
She doesn't live in Gilead anymore.
Right.
And she's always going to have Gilead within her in some way, but she doesn't have to live it like day in and day out. It's okay to go have pad thai with the person you're smitten with.
Yeah, and I think it's okay to be angry that June stayed and wanted to continue that fight, and Moira did leave. And she does get to reap the benefits of being in Canada and taking a moment to herself to have some pad thai and to live her life for a second.
What was going through all of that if not to have moments like this?
At the end of the day, she would be getting to sit and have pad thai with Una and have Una be eating out of her bowl because the best food is other people's.
Is that her name?
Una, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I missed that.
Yeah, she kept calling her. She called her Una twice. In this scene, it's really wonderful getting to watch Moira just take time for herself with someone else, and with someone else that's not affiliated with Gilead, insofar as we know. This could have been an entirely organic meeting, but they're not discussing Gilead things and stuff. They're laughing, they're smiling, they're just enjoying each other's company, which is everything that Moira deserves and everything that we've wanted for her since that moment that she first got into Canada. That hope and that wish for her that she would be able to find some mental reprieve. So it's very gratifying watching this.
New hope.
New hope.
It is a new hope.
Nice
tie-in, Scarlett. What did you two think about Una asking Moira to come with her? First off, where the hell is here? Or there?
Know.
Where are you going? But also,
somewhere at Lake Superior.
Really? Oh, that's right, Thunder Bay.
Yeah, she's going to resupply Thunder Bay, which is relatively near the Canadian border.
And relatively near Chicago?
Not quite. It's a lot closer to, Minnesota.
So after this, June is giving our fave new Jezebel instructions. Her name's Daisy, by the way. And she's like, I don't know if I can do this because she's got that little concoction, that extract that she and Esther made. I wanted to call her Eden for a second. And June, uses that line again. We're the ones we've been waiting for. And that's what my mom used to say. So June actually plays the part of this Martha really well because this aunt walks in and oh my God, I really wanted to punch this lady. She says, Commander Lowe is waiting, nothing too fattening, my little piggy. And I'm like, wow, okay. And I feel like after that point, Daisy's like, no, I think I'm going to do this. Yeah, we can definitely. Yep, I'm ready. Yep. Yeah, hand that bottle over.
Mm-hmm.
It's time.
Absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right about that aunt coming in, and that was the turning point for Daisy, because Daisy obviously was trepidatious before that and was unsure whether or not she would be able to do it. And then as soon as that aunt left, she like says, she basically grabs a vial and says, better to die on your feet than live on your knees.
Mm-hmm. Quote attributed to, oh, I don't know, just about everybody. When I looked this up, the one that came up the most was Zapata,
Yeah, that's who I got.
but it was always like piggybacked with like, you know, supposedly he said this, but
Right.
it also could have been these other people too.
Fair
So
enough.
pick your poison. I'm down with going with the Zapata, I think.
Yeah, I liked him. Mexican
Sure.
revolutionist. I like this story. The brief Wikipedia synopsis I read.
But I do love that Daisy offered to June. You sure you don't want to stick around for the fireworks?
Yeah.
Because I think that Daisy understands that June has seen some shit and does get just as much gratification out of watching this go down. And June, as far as we can tell, is definitely going to welcome the invitation because we see that smirk.
This is her Moira moment. This is her eating pad thai right now. That she's going to stick around and watch these bastards down this poison.
And it's just so many birds with one stone. It's liberating the women, but also killing the commanders, which also fucks up the offensive that's about to happen in Chicago, which then helps the resistance. Like, it's like she said, it's too good not to. You can't pass up this opportunity here.
Absolutely.
The most glorious scene that has ever seen before is upon us. The Lord has opened, the fruit has been blessed. Praise be, Serena is gonna have her own blessed miracle. Amen.
Oh,
Blessed
Jesus
be the
Christ.
fruit.
under his eye.
This is so awesome because you don't see this coming. You know, eventually it's going to happen at some point. We knew this, but I just don't think I was expecting it to happen in this exact way because she's sitting there smoking this cigarette and Twello comes in with the good news and I'm like, Serena, put the cig down. You have a blessed miracle. Put it down.
Oh, and she's guns blazing as she charges from one end of that like chain link yard all the way to Twello, cursing the whole way, like damning him up and down, chain smoking that, like huffing and puffing from that cigarette like the big bad wolf she fancies herself to be. And it's just so gratifying watching her be deflated with what should be the happiest news of her life.
Yeah.
Yep. She's speechless. Her face. That is.
It's just, it kills me because I'm so disgusted with Fred in that scene that I completely understand why she would be charging forth saying, I want to rid myself of him in every way possible. And it's like all we've ever wanted Serena to finally have this realization of like, you are in an abusive relationship. He is a piece of shit and you need to run as far and as fast as you can. And she finally does and is very poetically confronted with this wall of new information, and she will now forever be linked to Fred, and everything that she has ever wished for is now probably everything that she is hoping is not going to work out. I'm not saying that she's going to hope this baby doesn't work out. This isn't the situation in which she wanted to find herself pregnant.
Nope, it is not ideal, and now she will never be rid of Fred if this is the case. And then Suffragette City by David Bowie of all songs starts to play. And then we see June putting some Nightshade extract in the bottle. Daisy opens the door and then it's time to schmooze some commanders.
So you have this scene with David Bowie, the king of like excess, like ridiculous, funky psychedelic 70s pop, playing with the JCC, like sparkly glitter crew romping around, shoving Nightshade tequila down the throats of all these commanders and eyes and guardians. And it's so wonderful watching this raucous display. It must have been extremely gratifying.
I was gratified watching it. I was like really thoroughly enjoying what was happening. I mean, they're just feeding these guys shot after deadly shot after deadly shot. And I'm just like, fuck yeah, let's dance.
I was really just enjoying the point where that horrid aunt says that she wants some tea to then June staring at the teacup to then finally the scene ending with Daisy serving the tea. And I really, really enjoyed that progression.
So after this reverie, we cut to June in the front seat of the Doom tank as they're driving back down this very dark, twisty road. And June is smiling. And I mean, I know I'm a constant nihilist, but as June is in this front seat bopping along smiling, and I looked at how much time was left on the clock, I was like, something's wrong. Something's very wrong. We are never allowed joy in Gilead for more than 3 minutes. And it's been about 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, between knowing the end of the episode was coming and then just the inherent creepiness of a farm at night. Like, it was just, the suspense was built in. You know what I thought was really funny with this scene as she's like coming up on it, probably I think it comes before she sees the bullet casings. But we talk a lot about how they film the show in a way that it always feels like June is being watched, and they very, very, very much did that in the scene, but I ignored it entirely because they do it so often that I was like, oh, there's not really someone there. That's just how they film it. And then it ended up being entirely plausible that we were seeing exactly the standpoint of all sorts of those soldiers or whoever it is that Nick is with. But yeah, the scene is suspenseful. It works every single time. And that gunshot to the head of Good Guardian, it scares me every time. And I know it's coming. I know exactly what point it comes. It comes after you hear him grab his gun, and I still can't prepare myself for any time. And then the blood splatter all over her face. Like, oh, that was traumatizing just to watch that.
Yeah, that was wild. I agree with you. They were being watched. And did you notice when they pulled up to the house that all the doors were open? All the doors at the front of the house were open.
Is that why she said something's wrong? I couldn't figure out specifically what it was, but that makes sense.
Yeah.
All the lights were on, all the doors were open. Windows were open too, so that way they could hear the sound of the approaching vehicle. It's a very strong tactical measure because it puts the power on your side of being able to hear the approach. Also, something else that felt like a very rookie mistake. This Guardian should have turned the lights off on the Doom van.
No. They were very bright lights, weren't they?
Yeah, as soon as they got out and he's like, I'm not leaving you, which is incredibly noble. It's incredibly noble. Next move after that, turn off the headlights. You cannot see anyone that you're walking into. They can see you. They know your silhouette. They can watch your steps. They know everything that's happening. Massive tactical failure. I'm not saying he deserved to get shot in the head, but...
Yeah, I agree with you. That would have at least made it a little bit more complicated to watch them, but instead it was like 2 giant spotlights on their targets.
It would have definitely decreased their odds. But Good Guardian, like, you gotta appreciate that he stayed with her till the end and that he wasn't going to leave her. You also have to appreciate that it was a clean shot to the head. I'm glad that he didn't suffer, because it would have been very easy for them to shoot him in the knee and make an example of him and put him on the wall.
Oh, I didn't think about it that way. That's a really good point.
There could be an argument for burying the conspiracy altogether and not showing that there were any eyes or any guardians that were actively involved. But I appreciate that they gave him a merciful end.
And you know, it's still another end that happened because of something June initiated. I guess that's the hard part of being a leader anywhere, is that you have to take responsibility for these things. And unfortunately, in this particular scenario, there's always going to be deaths. It's I don't know. It's got to be a really, really hard thing to reconcile. It's like you're trying to do this really important, greater good thing, but there's always a price.
June has become much more adept at handling it than most. I think that she's better at handling it than any of the other handmaids, but that still does not do proper justice to the psychological toll it must take.
That's why when I'm watching this, I try to think of it in terms of like if you were a person in this exact situation. You know, not with the life experience that I'm bringing to the table, but just all that you know in this situation. How are you going to react and carry yourself and try to make some sort of life for yourself wherever it is that you land?
I don't want to take this to the level where I want to answer, but I will just say that I do think about it, especially in this episode. And I guess the takeaway I always get, and it's just so me out of the 3 of us, is that you just have to really enjoy each moment as it comes, because I feel like through this entire episode, I was just so afraid that June's going to get caught at any point when she went to go to the country club place, that I'm like, what does it feel like to know that at any point it could just all be over? And in my mind, I feel like if she gets caught, she's just going to be straight up killed, which obviously is not what happens. But I'm just like, how do you deal with that? How do you go through the day knowing that at any point you are in so much danger? Like, you can't even, like you said, Scarlett can't sleep at night. Find the joy where you can, like Janine did in the colonies. And I don't know, everyone deals with it slightly differently, but that's all I can get out of it. And I will end my philosophical talk with that.
But I do think that the deepest cut here, so June obviously is about to have a momentary freak out when, she's got brain matter splattered across her face. And then she sees all of the sniper lasers pointing at her.
Well, she tries to grab the gun first. That was smart. I thought that was really cool that she had the wherewithal to go for that gun when that must have been so shocking. And she did seem so out of it for a second.
She did, but she recovered quite quickly, which has shown that she's come quite a long way. Is immediately halted in her tracks with all of those laser scopes, which Scarlett, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a classic Hollywood trope. Realistically speaking, if a sniper is trying to snipe you, they're not going to have a bright red laser sight on you that you can see.
I have absolutely no idea.
If I'm not mistaken, that is a Hollywood trope purely for the dramatic purposes. To the best of my knowledge, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the notion of the red laser from a scope is entirely a Hollywood trope, because what it ultimately does is it gives up the shooter's position. If that's the case, let's appreciate this for the cinematographic beauty that this is. You have all these sniper lasers pointed on her, and then you hear the Discord music kick in. And our sweet, gentle Nick's voice pops up, and they cut to June. And one of the lasers, sniper lasers, is pointed at her back, and one is pointed at her chest. And they absolutely intersect, and it looks like a laser is cutting straight through her heart.
I felt that. When you just said it just now, I'm like, ow. Because I didn't notice.
Yeah, I didn't
That's
think so,
cool.
but I love it.
Not gonna lie, as someone who is very much Team Luke, hearing Nick's voice as he's approaching her, I was gutted after the first watch of this, realizing that there was the Nick episode of that. Because I did watch the quick little Nick snippet last week, and then I remembered, I was like, oh no, I was like, what if we have a turn of Nick? Hearing him crouch down and whisper to her, "What, I'm trying to keep you alive?" Is that what he said?
I don't know. I wanted to ask you guys because I swear I heard it two ways. I'll try to keep you alive, or I'm trying to keep you alive.
I'm trying to keep you alive is what I wrote. What was the other version you thought you heard?
I'll try to keep you alive, which is not reassuring.
Oh, interesting. No, I didn't think I heard it that way at all. That is not reassuring.
No.
I just like the way that the scene ended with her looking up as she starts to stand up and the lights go away, and then the big spotlight comes on her face, and she has really no choice but to kind of face forward and look right at him. And I know the show has been really kind of dangling this carrot of, is he a good guy, is he not? And we really don't know exactly what we're getting with Nick and what his exact, I mean, obviously he just said he's trying to keep her alive, or he tried to, or he will try to, but I think that June has to have a little bit of a reckoning with what's going on with Commander Blaine at this point, because I don't know if they've really had a conversation since he seems to have not followed through with the Swiss. Kind of just drops off the map. So I am curious what she's going to say about that, because she knows that that's the last she heard. And I think that her telling Esther earlier in this episode, I think there's good guys everywhere. I think that's her trying to remind herself, or to reassure herself, that Gilead is complicated and Gilead does make it hard for everyone. And also she does think Nick is still good in some sort, but there is a big question mark here for June. So we'll see.
She puts her trust in him in this moment. And I am a sucker for a violin, for a sad, wistful, thoughtful violin. And I was really teary-eyed going out of this episode too. Oh my God. This episode made me tear up 3 goddamn times over not very obviously like heart-wrenching stuff. It was like these little things.
I mean, it stands to reason though, because I mean, okay, so what part of this exactly made you cry?
I don't know. I feel okay. So when she was standing there, with these floodlights on her, and she's looking at Nick, and I feel like there is a lot of I don't know, like I don't know. I don't want to say resolute. I don't want to say defiant. That's not it either. Just there was a lot of power there. So that was one thing that I noticed. And then, I was thinking about this like reckoning with Nick that she needs to have. And I'm, thinking about like how like every time that they're together, it could be their last. And even now, 4 seasons in, we still don't know if we can like trust the guy. And then just throw in the sad violin. Oh, and by the way, we don't know where her friends are.
That's another part.
That was another thing. I don't know. It just made me super friggin' emotional.
And it sort of balances that feeling of defeat, because you do have the Discord music playing in the background, that wistful violin, as well as her like juxtaposed with her standing on her feet with all these sniper like lasers pointed at her, and knowing that she has to trust Nick that like she's going to at least survive the night. And it's a perfect like combination of like better to die on your feet than live on your knees. So I think that like that was what made it so powerful that she did.
That's awesome. That just ties it in perfectly.
I got to give a little bit of credit to the woman who wrote this episode. Kara Snyder has been a writer and a consultant for Handmaid's Tale since the beginning. She is responsible for season 1, I believe it's episode 8, Jezebels. She's responsible for season 2, episode 5, Seeds. She is responsible for one of our favorite episodes, Holly. She is also responsible for season 3, episode 2, Mary and Martha, where June meets Natalie for the first time. So every single one of her episodes though is just riddled with these really strong, intense musical vibes. Like she really leans into the emotional aspect of these things. She also wrote Unfit.
Oh, that's a fave.
She really does a fantastic job of laying a scene and utilizing light in a gorgeous way and utilizing music as a second character, as like another character. So hat tip to you, Miss Snyder. Any big thinky thoughts on this episode, or are you two just chomping at the bit, raring to go for the next episode?
I am chomping at the bit to go see what the next episode is. But my big thinky thoughts for this episode is really just that I think my thought in the beginning holds up throughout the episode of there are a lot of cold, hard truths that every character has to face. And some of them are good, some of them are difficult, some of them are bittersweet. But it was really interesting to watch every character be confronted with different truths throughout.
I would like to say that I'm feeling pretty good about the fact that my feeling about Nick and Larry kind of forming an alliance to try to see June through this looks like it's kind of happening so far. I don't know how long it's going to last, but I was feeling pretty vindicated about that. I was like, yeah, I knew this was going to happen.
I'm feeling optimistic in the short term for the fate of all of the handmaids. Other than June, we have to believe that we're going to see at least a few of them again. We know that we're going to see Janine again because thanks to all the spoilers that we got from Hulu, I'm definitely feeling that this is temporary reverie, because Gilead never lets us have anything nice for long. I'm just really genuinely excited to see where we go from here. I can't wait for Serena to have to come to terms with the notion that she's pregnant with Fred's child.
Oh boy, yeah. I want to be a fly on the wall for that. I really hope that we get a lot of her processing this the next episode. I'm also feeling that like because this episode was kind of I know that I said I teared up like 3 times, but like as far as like emotionally like huge moments, it doesn't really have those. It's like a series of like smaller ones. And so I'm like kind of concerned about the next episode. I feel like there's going to be something very big
Yes.
Yeah,
and
I
Also
think so.
feel that.
potentially dissatisfying is going to happen.
Potentially catastrophic. No, I'm with you on that entirely. Especially considering that episodes 1, 2, and 3 are designed to be presented in one fell swoop, as they'll all be released at the same time. This certainly feels like the bit of the stretch of building in anticipation for a cataclysmic bomb drop. Well, we'll just have to wait and see, won't we?
Well, thanks for hanging out with us again. Join us back here for the next one. Yeah, peace out. I can't do this right now.
I know, it's hard. Well, I wanted to say see you next week, and I'm like, or see you whenever you hit play on the next episode, because I guess you have them all. I don't really know. We have no schedule.
Just binge listen. We know you're going to binge listen anyway. Just keep smashing that watch button and that listen button.
Oh my God.
12 hours nonstop. Handmaids.
So tired.
All the handmaids you can muster.
Yeah, what she said.
All right, thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.
Oh my God, I'm so hungry.